Oh, good evening. Welcome back to Sitting Down a Snowy Laneway PODCAST. Today's episode is about
Mary Mount and the Connecticut Boogeyman. Today I'll be talking about a real cold murder case, the disappearance of Mary Catherine Mount. Thanks to French Blue 8 for suggesting it, as I hadn't heard about it, but it is chilling and sad, and deserves more attention. New Canaan, Connecticut is a sleepy small town with New England colonial houses lining leafy streets. You'd be forgiven for thinking you'd reached the town of perfect. Must be why filmmakers shot The Stepford Wives there. The town began as farmland and shoe factories before the railroad from New York came through, and with it wealthy businessmen who at first summered in the picturesque town, then eventually settled there year-round, preferring to commute to the city. Our story begins in the spring of 1969, at a time when everybody knew everybody. You didn't have to lock your doors, before the internet and video games kept kids inside. Hide and seek and kick the can enticed them outside, only having to return home for mum's dinner. That's how it was for 10-year-old Mary Catherine Mount. On the 27th of May, 1969, dressed in pink, the little girl was at play, chasing her kitten. But when night fell, she never came home. Mary's mother panicked and rang the police. Search parties went out looking for her, combing the many wooded areas near the Mount's residence, but to no avail. Her dad Joseph was an executive at IBM, so possible kidnapping was suspected at first. However, weeks later, in Wilton, off a seldom-travelled road, a fisherman came across Mary's lifeless body in the woods by the South Norwalk Reservoir. She was killed by blunt force trauma to the head. 3 weeks later, and 30 miles away in Bethany, Connecticut, a young girl, looking for her horse, found instead the decomposing grave of a teenage girl. Her body had been circled by stones on the ground. She was identified as 14-year-old Dawn Cave, and she had gone missing the day before Mary Mount. Both disappeared between 5 and 6 p.m. Both had the same cause of death, fractured skull, most likely from a rock. Police didn't say both murders were related, but many suggested they could be considered as having been done by the same unknown killer who was becoming known as the Boogeyman, and he was about to strike again. This time in New Haven, Connecticut, but still in May of 1969. Diane Toney was 11 and was abducted while watching a parade with her family. Her body was later found in the same condition as Mary Mount and Dawn Cave, in the Timberlands forest, which lays the same distance between New Haven as it does to Bethany, where Dawn Cave was murdered. An eyewitness named Dominic Pilati claimed to have seen the killer a day after Dawn Cave had gone missing. On the outskirts of the Timberlands forest, Dominic drove past a man standing next to a white car parked alongside of the road. This is a sketch of the man, if you're watching this on YouTube and haven't downloaded this as a podcast. Police discarded it as a useless suspect. A year went by, but by now life had changed. Everybody locked their doors, and strangers weren't trusted, which is probably for the best. In the same town of New Haven, Connecticut, 5-year-old Jennifer Noon vanished on her way home from school. her body was found 8 days later in a section of woods in the Evergreen Avenue section of Hamden, Connecticut, halfway between New Haven and Bethany, where Dawn Cave was murdered. All 4 girls were killed the exact same way and were dumped in strikingly similar wooded Connecticut areas. Would police ever catch this monster? Well, a month before Jennifer Noon's disappearance, a man named Harold Meade killed 3 young mentally handicapped residents of the New Haven Regional Center, bashing them with rocks to the skull. Meade was a 52-year-old ice cream truck vendor, a profession that allowed him to travel certainly within the 40-mile area of each of the girl victims. He confessed to the 3 mentally handicapped men's murder and was sentenced to prison in 1972, with the judge remarking he was too dangerous ever to be freed. Unconfirmed reports from some of the witnesses to the girls' abductions identified Meade or his ice cream truck as being in the area, but he never confessed officially to any of the girls' murder, and the police seemed happy just to have him locked away. That was until 1985, when Meade was allowed out on weekend leaves for good behavior. In 1992, Linda Rayner, a 43-year-old social worker, was in Deep River, Connecticut, and in deep trouble. She went for a stroll on Hammonasset Beach, and her body was found there the next day. Her skull had been bashed with a rock. Sound familiar? Although never named as a suspect in Linda's murder, Meade was removed from the weekend release program, and he died in 2007 from a lengthy illness. Is the Boogeyman of Connecticut gone then? Maybe. Maybe not. There is one other possibility out there. Back in the town where all of this horribleness began, New Canaan. Back in 1970, in the same neighborhood of Marymount, another tragedy had taken place. On the 1st of December 1970, John Rice Jr., a 17-year-old high school student, killed his entire family. He bludgeoned his mum, grandma, and younger brother to death, while strangling his sister, all in the family house, a stone's throw away from the Mount residence. John Rice took off with the family car, a white station wagon, but was arrested 12 days later. His resemblance to the suspect's sketch has been suggested by many, but not by the police, even though, once caught, the Boogeyman killings stopped. He was tried in 1972, and as a juvenile was sent to Whiting Institute for the criminally insane. At least he was. He's out now, you see, somewhere out there. The Boogeyman is what children fear in darkened rooms, but for the victims here, the Boogeyman really did step out of the shadows into real life and rob them of theirs. Thanks again for French Blue 8 for suggesting this unsolved mystery. If you have an idea, post a comment or 3 below. Thanks.
Well, wasn't that interesting? It's a funny old world, full of snow and laneways. Comment down below or up above. I don't know how it works.